She came in for a simple lunch break, nothing more. But the moment she walked through those glass doors, all eyes turned cold. The manager's smile vanished, replaced with something uglier than hate. A single cruel act followed, a drink spilled, laughter echoing through the cafe. She stood there, drenched in soda and silence, her dignity slipping with every drop. But what no one knew was who was about to walk in next. And when he did, the room would never be the same again. Eva had always believed in kindness. She worked long hours at a hospital, helping patients who rarely even remembered her name. Her smile, soft, tired, but genuine, was the kind people didn't forget. Every Friday, she stopped by the same cafe for a small treat before heading home to her husband. It was her quiet ritual, a moment of peace before another weekend of endless responsibilities. That day, the sun was bright, the line was short, and she ordered her usual iced tea. Everything felt routine, until it didn't. The manager behind the counter, a woman named Claire, barely looked up. Her tone was sharp, her eyes colder than the air-conditioned room. Eva noticed, but brushed it off. She'd faced that look before, the one that questioned her presence, her worth, and her right to simply exist in certain spaces. Still, she stayed polite. That's what years of endurance had taught her, to smile through discomfort, to rise above it. But as she waited, the tension grew thicker. The whispers, the smirks, the deliberate delay. Something ugly was brewing, and Eva could feel it, an old, familiar sting hiding beneath civility. What she didn't know was that this moment, this ordinary coffee stop, was about to turn into something she'd never forget. Eva waited patiently, clutching the receipt in her hand. The minutes stretched, and she began to sense the shift in the air, the glances, the smirks from behind the counter. Claire, the manager, was whispering something to another employee who tried to suppress a laugh. Eva felt her throat tighten, but she kept her posture calm. She'd seen that look before, pity mixed with contempt, the kind that burned quietly. When her order finally came, it wasn't her iced tea. It was a cup filled with soda, fizzing over the edge. Confused, she tried to correct the mistake, but Claire's voice cut through the room. "Oh, I thought you'd like something." "Sweeter," she said, sarcasm dripping with every word. A few customers turned, watching. Eva's lips parted, but before she could respond, Claire's smirk deepened. Then, without warning, she tipped the cup, pouring the entire drink down Eva's shirt. The icy liquid soaked her instantly. Gasps rippled through the cafe. Some laughed quietly. Others just stared. Eva stood frozen, humiliated, her heartbeat roaring in her ears. Claire muttered something under her breath about people like her as she turned away, pretending nothing had happened. Eva wanted to leave, to disappear, but her hands trembled too much to even grab her bag. She could feel every pair of eyes on her, weighing her down like chains. The humiliation cut deep, not just because of the act, but because it wasn't new. It was the same cruelty she'd faced in 100 subtle forms. Dismissive tones, suspicious glances, forced smiles that hid disgust. But this time it wasn't quiet. This time it was public. Her chest ached, but she stood straighter. Not because she wanted to fight, but because she refused to break. She reached for some napkins, her movement steady, her pride intact. And then the door opened. A man walked in, tall, calm, wearing the kind of quiet authority that drew attention without a word. Claire didn't look up at first. Eva did. And the moment their eyes met, she exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for hours. He looked at her soaked clothes, the scattered ice on the floor, and the laughter still lingering in the air. His face didn't change, but his silence was louder than any shout. Something was about to happen. The cafe didn't know it yet, but their day was about to turn upside down. The man's shoes echoed softly against the tile as he stepped closer. The entire cafe seemed to fall silent. Claire finally looked up, irritation flickering in her eyes, until she saw the expression on his face. Calm, controlled, but beneath it, something cold and sharp. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "Eva," he said quietly, handing her his jacket. The way he said her name made Claire pause, like she'd just realized the woman she'd humiliated wasn't alone, wasn't small, and wasn't invisible. But it was too late. He turned his gaze to Claire. "Did you pour that on her?" Claire stuttered, her confidence fading fast. "It was just a mistake. He didn't flinch. "I saw everything." Someone in the back whispered his name, almost in disbelief. Within seconds, the whispers spread. The room shifted from smug amusement to uneasy recognition. The man standing in front of them wasn't just anyone. He was Daniel Roberts, CEO of the corporation that owned the very cafe they stood in. Claire's face drained of color. She opened her mouth, searching for words that wouldn't come. Daniel's voice remained steady. "You thought she didn't belong here, that she was less. But she's the reason I ever walked into a place like this with pride. She's my wife." The silence that followed was heavier than any shout. No one moved. No one breathed. Claire tried to apologize, but the words collapsed under her own shame. Daniel didn't respond. He simply looked at his wife, drenched, humiliated, but standing tall, and said, "Let's go. We'll handle this soon." As they turned to leave, the staff shifted nervously. They knew what was coming. What they didn't know was how far the consequences would reach. The next morning, the cafe doors never opened. A notice hung across the glass, "Closed for investigation." By noon, every employee involved was suspended. By evening, the video of the incident, recorded by a quiet customer, had spread across the internet. Millions watched, outraged by what they saw. A woman humiliated not for what she did, but for who she was. Ava didn't seek revenge. She didn't have to. The truth had already done the work for her. The company issued a public apology. Claire and her staff were fired the same day. Reporters called, messages poured in, and strangers thanked her for standing tall when most would have walked away. But for Eva, the moment wasn't about going viral, it was about being seen. About proving that silence doesn't have to mean surrender. That dignity can still speak louder than hate. Daniel stood beside her at the press conference, but he didn't speak for her. She did. Her voice trembled, but her words were clear. "This isn't just about one cafe. It's about every place where someone decides who deserves respect and who doesn't. I just hope next time someone else won't have to go through what I did." Her story became a reminder, a reflection of what still hides beneath politeness and smiles. It wasn't just one incident. It was a mirror. And as the world watched, one question lingered. How many more stories like Ava's will it take before we finally learn that equality shouldn't require exposure to exist?